Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to news for the week of May 5th, 2025, Cinco de Mayo.
That's right. We're going to be talking about Node 24. That's the big headliner. But before we get into that, how was your weekend? I heard your child had a double ear infection.
Yep. She's not normally this spicy, but over our vacation to the North Shore, she was having a very sad time, especially in the car ride, and especially when we laid her down to change her, which was kind of one of the cues for like, oh, I bet she's got an ear infection. And also she's yanking on her earlobes pretty hard.
Yep.
So we brought her in Sunday night when we got home, and double ear infection. She's dosed up now. She's feeling a lot better. But boy, oh boy, was she a spicy lady this weekend. But we had a great vacation regardless. We got to eat a ton of food. We got to explore the shore. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. Where was that up in the North Shore?
Oh, we went to two harbors.
Okay.
There's a lot of little good restaurants, little mom and pop places.
Yeah.
A lot of good pie. We over-indexed on pie. I'm pretty sure I ate more pie than actual human food.
Yep. I think if you are going to visit Minnesota, I think you definitely want to go up to the North Shore in Duluth. But specifically, we stayed at the Two Harbors Lighthouse Bed and Breakfast, and it was really cool. So I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a really great staycation. And if you are a runner, the Grandma's Marathon is coming up here in a month, and they start in Two Harbors. But if you are a runner, I would suggest making it like a marathon plus vacation situation. And it's so good.
That's cool.
We have a new jam event, a jam night for the IGDA Twin Cities, and that went really well. So that happened last week, Wednesday, and that'll be on the first Wednesday of every month now. And there's another brand new event called Game.wave, and that inaugural event is happening this Thursday, and I'll make sure I link to the time and place for that.
Is that a play on like a sound wave file?
Yeah, you got it. It's a game event where we're going to be talking about audio production for games in all its forms.
Cool.
So we'll be talking about different like sound effect production, different like audio production, music production, all of the things that go into audio in a game.
Sweet. That sounds fun. I also had a great weekend. It was actually a 3-day weekend for us because the kids had off on Friday. And there was a lot of fishing. Went fishing a couple times. There was a couple classes that the kids and my wife went to. We had family friends over for like a traditional Pakistani dinner. So we made tandoori chicken, and I got these things called pakoras, which are like little fried potato ball things, and little cocktail samosas, which you can just get frozen ones at the grocery store. Those are pretty awesome. So it was delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even more yum, on Mother's Day, Cassie requested a special brunch. So I made breakfast burritos and cinnamon rolls, homemade cinnamon rolls, and they were very good. We spent tons of time outside, and I was actually able to make just a little bit of tiny bit of progress on my office build in the backyard.
Nice.
All right.
So what do we got in the news?
Headliner, Node 24 is released. Woohoo!
Yes. And it's got a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, it does. So I think for TypeScript developers, we already knew this was coming, and we've covered this quite a bit, but this is the official release that brings TypeScript support to the masses. As you probably know, it was introduced originally in one of the minor releases for 23, but a lot of people don't upgrade until the next major version, so once people get Node 24, now they've got stable support for TypeScript. So that's type stripping support. As a reminder, you can turn on experimental transforms if you want to, but just by default, it just strips types. But now you can just execute node, main.ts or index.ts, and it'll run it. And you don't have to do any extra build steps or anything. And the other thing, as a reminder too, if you have your TS config for your TypeScript project, you now have the ability to turn on erasable syntax only as part of TypeScript 5.8. And if you do that, it will make sure that your TypeScript project will be compatible with Node's type stripping. So if you're just getting started, like on the fresh, then you probably just want to enable that, and you can just use native TypeScript support in Node now.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely a thing you should take a look at, and there's no reason not to.
Yeah. There's some other stuff too. I wasn't aware that Node actually had a permission security model, but they do, and it's now been marked stable. So the flag used to be -- experimental permission, and now it's just -- permission. The permission model is a little bit different if you're familiar with maybe like Dino's permission model. And we're going to do a Thursday episode that dives a bit deeper into all the changes in Node 24, because there is quite a bit to talk about. But for the most part, I mean, the too long didn't read is that it mostly supports file system and a few other flags. But anyway, that was something I didn't know existed, and now that's stable, so that's cool. There's been some test runner quality of life improvements. Specifically, it will run subtests now and wait for them. So in order to do subtests before, you had to use the await keyword, and so you'd say like await runner.test, the test method, and you'd have to manually wait for subtests, but now Node will just do that for you. Also brings npm 11. And there's, I think the only notable breaking change is that if you use -- ignore scripts, it now includes the prepare lifecycle script. So it just adds another lifecycle script to that list of scripts that I will ignore. So that's kind of nice. And then if you are a web developer, one of the priorities for Node has been adopting more web standard APIs. And so they just added support for the URL pattern API, which you can read more about on MDN. Actually, I don't know if I've used that one directly. Have you used that one directly, the URL pattern?
I haven't, and it's mostly because all of the SPA frameworks have implemented some flavor of this for their routing. But this is kind of an attempt, I think, by the browsers to implement something that everyone needs, and it's kind of laborious to implement. And if you implement it wrong, it's a security vulnerability.
Yeah, so this would be like in your path, you could say like curly brace ID or whatever, and that would be a route parameter. Is that kind of what that is?
That's the idea.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So that's the highlights. We'll link to a couple different resources. There was a good introduction to Node.js 24 from Red Hat, who's part of the technical steering committee. So they've got a nice blog post on that. And otherwise, just wait for Thursday and we'll dive a bit deeper into it. As far as TSGo news goes, that pun is not going to get old, I guess. I think one of the major things that was added recently was just support for parsing the type acquisition tsconfig option. So that wasn't there before, and now is. So if you were relying on that config option and you could not use TSGo, now you can. Anders also added support for cancellation in the checkers. And this is because before, if the checkers would just keep going, even if the context was canceled, like in VS Code, if for some reason you cancel the build or something like that, it would just keep checking. And now it will bail out early if there's a timeout or if there's a problem. So it's a nice stability and a performance fix. Otherwise, there was mostly just bug fixes in the PRs, so nothing too notable there. You've got some JavaScript news in the wider ecosystem, too.
Yeah, the latest from ECMA is the records and tuple proposal has been withdrawn.
What?
And this was very sad to me, but it is actually for a good reason. Now, if you're not familiar with the records and tuples, the idea is kind of to make like a value-ish kind of object where you can do like value equality on objects. This is super useful if you're doing things where you have like a map or a set and you need to, say, oh, I have this object that needs to be treated like a value for regards to like equality, like for a key, for example. And that's super useful. Otherwise, you have to come up with your own scheme to do that. And it's a common, use case. So it came with new syntax and it came with a few restrictions that made it a little tricky to use maybe ergonomically. But that proposal has been withdrawn. And now there's a new proposal called Composites, which is the champion is Ashley Claymore. It's coming in at stage 1, and it mostly solves the problem, I think, that Records and Tuples set out to solve, which was this object equality immutability thing. Oh, the thing I didn't mention is that Records and Tuples would be immutable. I totally skipped over that, so you wouldn't be able to mutate them once you've created them.
Okay.
Which is also a desirable property. But in Composites, they are doing something similar, but instead of new syntax, there is a new top level function called composite, and you pass an object to it, and then it'll go and produce a composite object that implements this equality aspect that the Records and Tuples would have done. And it also freezes the object, so you can't modify it. So it gives you kind of a best of both worlds situation here. So you get that immutability using existing features, instead of new syntax.
And will that solve the same performance problem of the equality? Because I imagine what you're talking about is structs are useful in a game engine when you have a lot of values to be passing around. You want to make the equality checks really quick.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of the problem of the new syntax was, in order to make changes, you got to make a copy. And that's still the case. But in this case, you can use an existing object as your reference. So you could be mutating a thing and then make lack of a better term, a copy of it that is a composite that you could use for equality.
Okay.
So
that's cool. Neat.
Next up, I've got a Parcel bundler bit of news. Is they have now announced React Server Components in beta, which is great. We got more bundlers that are supporting React Server Components. This is all coming from a scoped package at Parcel/RSC for React Server Components. If you're using Parcel, version 2.14.0 and greater supports this out of the box. They have a couple things in there that are Parcel specific. They have use client entry Parcel specific directive, and then use server entry Parcel specific directive. And for those curious, the entry is just telling, for server entries and specifically, it's telling Parcel that, this is a code split boundary that needs to only run on the server, and go ahead and generate this and give it full access to server APIs. And it'll never run on a browser.
Because I'm familiar with use client and use server when I've done, Next.js development. Is this the equivalent but for Parcel, or is this in addition to those two directives?
It's in addition. So this is more like how do I produce the bundle? So This is how do I shape my output JavaScript, where Next you kind of you don't have a choice, right? As far as I know, maybe you do, but in Parcel you need to indicate somehow to the bundler how to break things apart.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. We have got some community highlights. So related to Node 24, I guess I wasn't aware that it was delayed, but apparently it was delayed. And there was an interesting thread on Blue Sky for some of the details surrounding that. But I think it mostly boils down to C++ compilation support on Windows, because apparently V8 dropped support for Microsoft VSC. I forget what that stands for. You probably know.
It's the Microsoft C compiler.
There you go. Yep. So the Microsoft C compiler, and apparently V8 had supported that, and Node was using that. And because of that, the team switched completely to Clang CL on Windows. So the entire build chain changed for Windows. And me not being a C++ developer, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But when I mentioned this to you, you were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Do you want to explain a little bit about why that makes sense?
Yeah, the Microsoft C compiler is well hated in the C community, mostly because it behaves differently than every other C compiler out there. There's a lot of Microsoft-isms. There's also a lot of things that Microsoft just refuses to implement in their C compiler. I think they're pushing everyone towards other languages, so they just don't want to put from an outsider, I don't have any insider knowledge. From an outsider looking in, it looks like they just don't want to invest in the C language. And, fair enough, I guess. That makes sense. So if you were concerned about this, Clang is what they're switching to, and Clang produces ABI, which is Application Binary Interface compatible output with Microsoft VC. So you can use MSVC stuff as long as you are doing the same API, or excuse me, ABI. So I mean, it does cause a hassle if you were already using that in your build tool chain and you already did all that investment to make it work for you. But I think it's probably for the best because Clang works a lot better cross-platform for C anyway, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I use for my C programming is I use Clang wherever I can. But, it makes sense that they dropped it. And maybe write a comment, tell us if you disagree. But to me, it makes sense.
Yeah, but hopefully that means now everything is sort of aligned together. They got the better build chain now on Windows, so maybe that will speed up some of the next node releases. I guess we'll see. Another thing that I saw from the community was a blog post on dev.to. Let me just bring it up. I want to pronounce the name correctly, but I'm probably going to mess it up, but it's by Abtahi Tajwar. So this is a really nice blog post on type-safe theming in Tailwind CSS using variables in TypeScript. And so he sort of goes through why the Tailwind config.js isn't good enough for theming if you want to use TypeScript because it's not strongly typed. So what he's basically created is like a code generator, essentially, where you can declare all your variables in TypeScript and it generates the right Tailwind config for your themings, and it generates the CSS variables so you can get it all strongly typed, which is pretty cool. I've used Tailwind a little bit, and that's something that I would like if I was doing it in a production application with TypeScript. So I think you definitely want to check this out if that is you. Next up, we've got some Reddit community stuff for TypeScript gotchas. And so someone posted, hey, I'm kind of new to TypeScript. Do you have any gotchas that you wish you knew when you got started with TypeScript? And so there's a whole lot of comments on here, and I just wanted to share a couple of the top voted ones. So the first top voted one is never use any. And I think that is generally good advice, although I think once you know the rules, you can break them, right? So I've used any plenty of times in specific circumstances, but it sort of depends on how strict you want to be and like how much pain do you want to go through to not use any.
Yeah. I think there's like a pragmatism. There's like, there's like don't use any for like 90% of the use cases. And there's maybe this like 10% that are just a real pain in the butt to like fix.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth your time.
Yeah. I think you could say that it's probably a good idea to use the strictest settings right out of the gate.
Yes.
With your TS config. So like no implicit any for sure, I think you want to enable that. And then you want to try as much as you can not to use any. But there's also the 80-20 rule. Like if you are going to be spending 80% of your time just to try to get rid of an any, then just use any and leave a comment or something like that about why you didn't do it.
Yeah. And as long as you're doing the right validation when you poke at stuff at runtime, you can get away with an any.
Yeah. So anyway, there's some nuance there, but I think pretty good advice to just be strict right out of the gate. The next one is, and I do agree with this, never assume JSON or YAML will be the type you're expecting it to be. Use Zod or whatever schema validation library to sanitize any input into your system. And so I think this is definitely a pro tip because we've all been burned by like even our APIs that we maintain change types, change the response shape. And so the types that if you hand roll those types like in your own TypeScript front end, then they can easily get out of sync with what's actually happening on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you have like a fully integrated full stack solution where you are generating accurate types from the back end into your TypeScript, then you definitely want to be using Zod or some other schema validator to make sure that it's in the shape that you expect. And if not, you want to catch those errors right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you have your own CI part of this is like the importance of doing an end-to-end test in your CI. It'll catch this kind of thing because your build might not fail, but you want these like runtime errors to fail. right? Because Zod will catch it at runtime. It'll say, oh, this schema doesn't match anymore. It'll bomb and it'll fail your playwright test, for example. And then you'll catch it before you go to prod.
That's right. So it is important, and this actually plays into the third upvoted comment, which is that there are no types at runtime. So if you're coming from a statically typed language like C#, this can be kind of a struggle where, like in C#, you can cast things as different types, and that happens at runtime. But in TypeScript, it's all compile time type checking. So there are types in JavaScript at the runtime, like we've covered that a little bit, of like there's number, Boolean, big int, and a few other ones. Strings, obviously, null, undefined. Those are types, but it's not the same. Like those are not type annotations. Type annotations only exist at, development time and compile time. So you can't like cast things.
100%.
All right. One cool thing is sort of almost like a tip, but if you have struggled with doing try catch in TypeScript and maintaining type safety, I think we can agree that try catch is not so great in TypeScript. Because like, as far as I know, you can't type the error type that comes in the catch block, right?
No, you can't. It's unknown, and then you need to go and poke at it. And that's part of the problem there, is because of how JavaScript, you can technically throw anything.
Yeah, you can.
It's not just errors. You can throw literally anything.
Yes, you can like throw objects and all sorts of stuff. So the blog post, it's on dev.to, goes into a trick where you can use an immediately invoked function expression, an IFI or an EV, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and it will maintain type safety. So it kind of gets around some of the issues in TypeScript when doing try catch. I think that what's apparently going to happen is that do expressions are going to be introduced. I don't know what stage they are, but once they are introduced, it would sort of take the place of these ifs.
I think any language with exceptions has this problem of hidden control flow, because as soon as you throw, you jump out of the normal flow and jump into a different block that is kind of unpredictable in your program, at least for humans to predict. It's not unpredictable in terms of what the program will do, but it's unpredictable as humans of parsers of code don't really think about that. They usually only think about the happy path. So the monadic Go style kind of forces you as a human to reckon with it, like while you're programming. So that might be one advantage of doing that versus like the hidden control flow of throwing and catching.
Yeah, and I'll link to a Blue Sky thread by Cristiera, I think is how you pronounce it. TypeScript FM is sponsored by Excalibur.js, the friendly TypeScript game engine for the web. Like many of you, I got into computers because I loved video games and dreamed of making one, but game development always felt a bit intimidating. Instead, I built a career in web development, though that dream of making games never really went away. Then I met Eric, who showed me I could use my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills to create games with just a bit of game design knowledge and the right engine. Excalibur.js makes game development approachable, offering everything you need to build 2D web games. Arcade physics, sprites, animations, input support, and integrations with tools like Tiled and AceSprite. It's beginner-friendly, yet flexible enough to grow with you. Our team has published 10 games using Excalibur, all written in TypeScript. If you're a web developer looking to dip your toes into game dev or sharpen your TypeScript skills, give Excalibur.js a try at excalibur.js.com. Click the big tutorial button to start building your first game, Excalibur, a Flappy Bird clone. After that, join our friendly Discord community of web developers who love to help each other and share game dev tips. Sweet. We've got some cool links and stuff. This was mostly for you, Eric. V8 compile hints, where you can hint to V8 to do stuff for compiling, like to actually give it some hints on how to compile the JavaScript itself, like in the inside of the engine.
Yeah, this is super cool. There's a new magic comment that you can put in your JavaScript that will, in V8, compile your functions specifically so that eager compilation, so you don't have to wait for them to be called, which is kind of neat, but potential performance foot gun, like everything. If it's so good, why not use it on everything? Well, if you do this on everything, what'll happen is you'll just spend a lot of time compiling JavaScript instead of running it. So I think while this is super cool, and I think there are some specific use cases for like critical JavaScript, like you need this to run very fast. And I think you want to use it very sparingly for those last bits of performance. So it's really important, I think, to measure here. As anything performance related goes, is to measure. But it's certainly really cool, and it makes me kind of excited for the future of what Chromium is going to be doing in V8 to control how our JavaScript is compiled and run. So it's very exciting to me because I have a talk about this in almost a week exactly about JavaScript performance in Oslo. If you'll be there, come say hi.
Nice. Yeah, I think this is beyond my pay grade for things that I would do inside of my own app. But if you're doing low-level stuff, this seems super useful.
Yeah. This looks cool.
Cool. I came across another runtime. Like, we need more JavaScript runtimes. This one we did not cover in our runtimes and compilers and fun times episode. This one is called Bare, and that's Bare, and it is a very minimal, lightweight runtime. I think the interesting thing here is that they have something called Bare Kit, which allows you to embed a JavaScript runtime on mobile. That's just something that I ran into. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, this is super slick. I hadn't heard of this yet, but this is super cool.
What you got for us?
Yeah, cool video from AwesomeDev about Node 24. So if you want like the quick rundown, definitely check out that video. Another video for you C programmers out there, build system in C for C, which I thought was awesome because I love when you build the language in the language. It's inspired by Zig. It's very much a work in progress, but I'm like pining for the fjords here on this one. I'm like, I want to try this right now, even though it's kind of like a early experiment, because I don't know if any of you have done CMake or other like C build systems, but it's like wild. That's all I can use to describe it. It's a wild time.
Nice.
Next up, as a Vim head, Typecraft.dev has a new website called Vim Challenges, where you can go and test your mettle and, get up on the leaderboard for solving different Vim challenges, number of keystrokes, amount of time. So it's kind of fun, especially if you're like, you were a competitor in the advent of code where you're trying to do it in as few keystrokes and time as possible.
Nice. We have a friend that was kind of his goal. His goal was to like learn Vim properly and like try to use the least amount of keystrokes possible to solve those challenges.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the news.
That's a wrap. See ya. Goodbye. Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.